So group 4, keeping you informed that the entire presentation will be recorded as proof of your appearance for the exam. Over to you guys.
Okay, so good morning everyone. I'm Urvi Nitin Maikar, roll number 7518. Today my group and I will be talking about gastrointestinal tract sample collection, transport and processing. So I'll begin by giving a brief introduction to the gastrointestinal tract. The GI tract is a series of hollow organs joined in a long, twisting tube from the mouth to the anus. These hollow organs that make up the GI tract are the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and anus. The liver, pancreas, and gallbladder are the vital accessory organs of the system. There are three main functions of the gastrointestinal tract, including transportation, digestion, and absorption of food. The mucosal integrity of the gastrointestinal tract is vital in maintaining the health of its patient and the function of its accessory organs. This system contains normal microbiota, including archaea, bacteria, fungi, protists, and even viruses. Because this microbiota is important for the normal functioning of the digestive system, alterations to the microbiota by antibiotics or even diet can be harmful. Additionally, the introduction of pathogens to the GI tract can cause serious infections and diseases. Now I'd like Aksar to further elaborate on the topic of infections in the GI tract. Thank you.
Thank you, Urvi. So, hello everyone. My name is Aksa Moin and my roll number is 7520. As Urvi clearly mentioned that gastrointestinal infections may be classified as bacterial, viral and parasitic. A wide range of gastrointestinal diseases are caused by bacterial contamination of food. We all know that foodborne diseases can arise from either infection or intoxication. In both cases, bacterial toxins are typically responsible for producing disease, sign, and symptom. The disinfection lies in where the toxins are produced. In an infection, the microbial gut is ingested, colonizes the gut, and then produces toxins that damage the host cell. In an intoxication, bacteria produce toxins in the food before it is ingested. In either case, the toxin causes damage to the cells lining the gastrointestinal tract, typically the colon. This leads to the common sign and symptoms of diarrhea or watery stool and abdominal cramps or the more severe dysentery. Symptoms of foodborne infection diseases also often include nausea and vomiting, which are the mechanisms the body uses to expel the toxic material. Most gastrointestinal illness is short-lived and self-limiting. However, loss of fluids due to severe diarrheal illness can lead to dehydration that can, in some cases, be fatal without proper treatment. Oral rehydration therapy with electrolyte solution is an essential aspect of treatment for patients with GI disease, especially in children and infants. Now, moving ahead with some of the common bacterial infections of the GI tract, E. coli. E. coli bacteria are found in the intestines of people and animals. Most varieties are harmless, but there are some strains of E. coli that secrete a toxin that can cause abdominal cramps, vomiting, and bloody diarrhea. E. coli spread through contaminated water or food that come in contact with animal manure. E. coli can also spread through direct person-to-person contact. Salmonella infection is commonly caused by eating raw or undercooked poultry, meat, and eggs. The majority of salmonella infection can be classified as gastroenteritis. Now, moving ahead with some of the common viral infection, norovirus are the most common cause of foodborne illness worldwide. It is especially likely to spread among people in confined spaces, although in most cases the virus is spread through contaminated food or water. Person-to-person transmission is also possible. Rotavirus is the leading cause of viral gastroenteritis in children worldwide. Children are commonly infected when they touch objects contaminated with the virus and then put fingers in their mouths. Now, moving ahead with some of the the parasitic infections of the GI tract. Giardiasis. Giardia is a parasite that spreads easily through human contact and contaminated water. It's resistant to chlorine and can spread in public swimming pools. Infection can occur from drinking water and bathing in contaminated lakes and streams. Cryptosporidiasis, a leading cause of waterborne diseases. Cryptosporidium is a microscopic parasite which causes cryptosporidiasis. It is an outer shell that helps it survive outside of the host and tolerate chlorine infection. There are many such infections associated with the GI tract. Now, I further would like Karan to continue with the sample collection.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karan. My roll number is 7517, and I will be talking about the common sample collection techniques used for using gastrointestinal tract. So, the gastrointestinal tract sampling is divided into two parts: the upper GI tract and the lower GI tract. So, the upper GI tract consists of gastric aspiration. Gastric aspiration is a diagnostic procedure used in the diagnosis of pulmonary tuberculosis in children and adults. The procedure involves obtaining the gastric juices from the stomach and testing them for the active tuberculosis infection. The gastric aspiration is mainly done in children under the age of 6, as they are unable to produce the sputum. However, it is also done in adults who are tested negative for the tuberculosis on spectrum smear examination. A gastric aspiration is usually performed early in the morning. The person should undergo a fasting over a period of overnight, and the patient should sleep at least for 6 hours. 6 hours. The procedure should be performed in a sterile examination room, but it can be also performed in patient's bed as long as the working space has been disinfected. The doctor will in the procedure involves the inserting of the sterile tube into the nostril, which is passed through the which is passed to the stomach. The an empty syringe is attached to the end at the end of the aspirating tube. The aspiration is performed aspiration is performed three times with the patient being placed in different positions. At least 5 ml of aspirate stomach content need to be retrieved. If the amount is insufficient, the gastric lavage procedure is used, in which the 10 ml of sterile water 10 ml of sterile water is passed down to the tube, and it is left inside the stomach for 2 to 3 minutes. The content of the stomach will then be aspirated until the sufficient amount of gastric juice is obtained. The result of a gastric aspiration procedure are highly accurate. The gastric aspiration is safe and minimal risk of possibility of complication. However, patients can expect a bit of discomfort before and after the procedure. So the next is the gastric biopsy. The gastric biopsy and culture is also called as stomach biopsy. It is a procedure used to diagnose the range of condition, including stomach ulcer. The biopsy involves removing of the sample from the stomach tissue. This sample is sent to the lab, and the pathologist tests it for presence of bacteria or any other microorganism that can cause infections. The gastric tissue biopsy involves a procedure called endoscopy, in which the sterile, thin, flexible tube with camera and a light is passed through the mouth into the stomach or the upper intestine. A small instrument is attached to the endoscope for the collection of sample. The sample is collected from the lining of the stomach or upper intestine. The doc- in the procedure involves the doctor will place the sample into the petri dish. If any bacteria are present, then it will grow, and it can be identified the medical professionals who will look for the signs for the infection. It can be also used for the cancer detection. Depending on the laboratory and extent of the testing needed, for typical biopsy result are often to return in 2 to 3 days. If the sample need more extensive testing, result could be take 7 to 10 days. Next part of the GI tract will be continued by Raj.
Okay, so thank you, Karan, and good afternoon, all. I am Raj Korambekar, roll number 7516. I would be continuing this further by discussing on the specimens collected from lower part of the gastrointestinal tract, which includes both the small and large intestine and anus. So when it comes to lower gastrointestinal tract, the most common way of collecting a specimen is from a stool sample, or also called as feces. This stool sample or feces sample is used to detect the presence of many disease-causing pathogens, including bacterias like Yersinia, Shigella, and Salmonella, viruses like rotaviruses and noroviruses, and also parasites like Giardia and Entamoeba histolytica, as it was already mentioned by Aksa in her infections part. Coming to the collection of stool samples, it is generally collected in a clean, leak-proof container with a wide mouth. It can be done at home also by the patient themselves. If the stool is in its liquid state, that is in the case of diarrhea, the volume should be approximately equal to a teaspoon, or that is 5 ml. Or if if it is in its semi-solid form or its form state, then a pea-sized piece, or which is equivalent to 5 gram, is sufficient for all the procedures that take place. Um, the transport of the stool sample should be done within 1 or 2 hours. But if a delay is anticipated for stools for bacterial culture, then it should be transferred to a, a transport medium. In the case of gastrointestinal tracts, the most commonly used transport medium is Carry-Blair medium, which preserves the viability of most of the intestinal bacterial pathogens, including Campylobacter and Vibrio species. Uh, it is recommended that fecal specimens should be collected in the early stages of the diarrheal diseases, so that like at that time the bacterial or the pathogenic load is the most, and preferably before any antimicrobial treatment is started. Now, in some cases, the stool culture is also used for diagnosis of parasites and ova. As I already mentioned, parasites like Giardia and Entamoeba histolytica can be present in the stool. In that case, certain transporters are used, like formalin and PVA, which acts as basically they destroy all the other bacteria and preserves the parasites, which can be tested further. In some cases, if the stool sample is not available, like in cases of infants or in cases of adults where they are compromised, or like maybe due to old age, in that cases rectal swab can be substituted for bacterial or viral culture. A rectal swab is the procedure for rectal swab is that a swab is inserted almost 2 to 5 centimeter past the anal sphincter. It is rotated for 5 to 10 times and removed following the same motion. We should see that the feces should be visible on the swab. Transport of this is very similar to the stool sample. If it is done like in the next 1 or 2 hours, the rectal swab can be transported in a clean vial. But if it is like a delay is again, if a delay longer than 2 hours is again expected, then it can be transported in the same medium, or it can be also transported in Stewart's medium, which is commonly used for many viral cultures. These were two common ways. Other than that, there is also one way, that is sigmoidoscopy, which is like a modified form of endoscopy only. In this case, a small pipe attached with like instruments like cameras and all is inserted through anus, and it basically helps doctor to diagnose um, the the sigmoidal colon, which is part of the large intestine just before the anus. The transport and yeah, it can we can also collect biopsy samples by instruments attached onto the pipe, and transport and all the processing is very much similar to what Karan had already said in his gastric biopsies part. So these were some of the very much common specimen collection like procedures used for gastrointestinal tract. Now I request Nirmiti to continue the part further. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nirmiti. My roll number is 7519. I will be talking about the gross specimens and precautions. So generally gross specimen is the preliminary test by which the pathology specimens are inspected visually by obtaining the diagnostic information. Generally it is of three steps, that is the physical examination, chemical examination and microscopic examination. Physical examination consists of color such as pale color, blackish color, and or bright red color. The consistency might be softened or hardened. The odor can be the generally the odor is normal. So if it is normal due to the indole and the scatole, so we have to check if the odor is increased or it can be of sour, rancid, or putrid. And talking about next is mucus. So in mucus, generally it is of small quantity, and normally it is of small quantity. So if we see that it is of excessive quantity, we have to check about that. Talking about the blood in the stool samples, which can be the causative agent, which can cause a severe problem, and we can also find pus in the fecal sample. Next, talking about the chemical examinations, we have to. It is generally of occult blood, and to check the carbohydrate and protein presence. It is if the pH normally is of ranges from 6.9 to 7.2. So if it is alkaline, so we can say that the fecal sample is containing excess of protein ingestion. That is, the patient can be excess in protein ingestion, or if it is acidic, the patient can be having excess of carbohydrate ingestion. And next, talking about the microscopic examination, it is generally of the remnants of food, pus cells, macrophages, RBCs, RBCs crystals, and to check if the bacteria, yeast, or mold or protozoa are present in the fecal sample. Further, the most important part of the process is precautions. So generally, we should avoid the uses of mineral oils, barium, uh, pr- uh, prior to the collection of the fecal sample, and because all these samples are because all these substances can interfere with the detection of pathogenic agents. The sample should be collected in a clean, wide-mouthed container, which should have tight lid um, to avoid contamination. And we should also avoid contamination while collecting the sample, like urine. It should not get mixed with the toilet water. The containers should be not overfilled, because it also can create contaminations. We should follow the proper guidelines marked on the containers. The transport media should be stored properly in a particular temperatures required. We should not send these stool samples collected before, like it if it has been over a period of time, like it should generally should be kept for 24 to 72 hours. After hours of collection should be needed. We should use sterile specimen cups, and we should send the samples properly in a laboratory to a laboratory as soon as we can for examination.
In case of biopsy, the preservatives we have added should not contain the specimen should be taken, should not be added. We should not add preservatives to it. It should be strictly avoided. The sample should be collected at a right time and in such a way which can minimize the contamination, and the sample should be collected in a proper manner which can also in a proper manner which should reduce the health of the which should reduce the safety risk of the patients as well as the examiner. The sample should be collected in a correct equipment and with a correct um, and should be kept in a correct way. It should properly documented in appropriate forms and can be and should be stored and transported appropriately. The most important part of this process is that we should use gloves and apron while handling the samples to take care of ourselves and even of the patients. These all are our reference of the topic, and thank you.
Can you zoom into the references, please? Okay. First and foremost, I would want to mention that the poster is really not good, okay, because there are so many formatting issues. The fonts are not same, okay, it's clearly visible that the fonts are not same. Then at several places there is no italics to organisms names, which is unacceptable. You are working in a group and that doesn't mean that उसने ये डाल दिया इसने ये डाल दिया मुझे देखना नहीं है. आपके पूरे टीम का ये काम है कि आप पोस्टर को ध्यान से देखो. काफी सारे जगहों पर इटैलिक्स है ही नहीं, फॉन्ट्स अलग अलग है, फॉन्ट का कलर का फर्क मुझे क्लियरली दिखाई दे रहा है, अभी जो पार्ट दिख रहा है उसमें भी दिखाई दे रहा है, फॉन्ट साइजेस अलग अलग है. अरे एटलीस्ट यू शुड टेक दिस as an activity wherein each one of you should go through the poster and make the changes. Formatting is so bad. This is something which you have to take care, guys. This is not acceptable, seriously. Anyways, now please go to the first part of your poster. First of all, esophagus spelling, that's really bothering me there, but okay. So who was the first person to have dealt with the parts of GI tract? Please tell me that when you talk about infections of the GI tract, which are the most common zones of the GI tract which get infected? Which are the common regions of the GI tract which get affected? Is Urvi around?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, the intestinal part.
So intestine is large and small. Amongst that, there are parts.
So
There
the
is
small
ileum,
intestine.
duodenum, jejunum. So which part of small intestine? And if you say large intestine, which part of the large intestine? Is it the colon? If it's the colon, then the ascending colon, descending colon, transverse colon. Or is it the rectum?
Sir, can I answer?
Yeah.
Sir, okay, sir. Urvi, sir.
Hello?
So in
Karan?
case of the,
Yes, Urvi. Go ahead.
so in case of the large intestine, it could be the rectal part or the anus.
Okay, can you give me an example of an infection which happens in the rectum or the anus?
Uh, so could be genital warts.
Okay, so for the sample collection part, uh, I think Karan, you can tell me about this. That when you say you have gastric washings, what is exactly done in this process? How do you collect the sample? Others can start putting up their questions in the chat box. Please do not wait for me to stop. Karan, did you get my question? I asked that when you say that gastric washings is one of the sample, how?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, in gastric washing, is normally like a aspiration part, which involves the tube placed in mouth and which is passed through the passed through the esophagus, and saline is flushed into the stomach. And the gastric content are normally examined.
Okay. There are some questions in the chat box. You can start addressing those and we will pitch in between.
Okay, Sahil, the tuberculosis actually happen in respiratory tract. It causes also pneumonia in children's. If the TB is caused, the pneumonia also is also the one which is caused. In pneumonia, the uh, in children's the mucus is the content of mucus is very high. So when they sleep, the mucus actually comes into the into the throat or into the mouth sometimes. So when they engulf the mucus, it goes into the stomach. So we can examine the tuberculosis, if presence of tuberculosis or by this sputums that they engulfed sputums, which they cannot produce.
I think I have mentioned this earlier also that Mycobacterium tuberculosis can cross the boundaries of the pulmonary area. And I had told you that M. tuberculosis is something which can cause infection in stomach, in uterus, and in even the brain. So it can even reach the blood. So it starts as a respiratory infection, but it can spread via blood to different parts of your body. Okay, Sahib.
Yes, sir.
I think Raj, there is a question.
Yes, yes, sir. So, Sarvesh, first, filariasis is a infection of tropical disease. So basically, it is caused by a parasite, a roundworm, which by the name Wucheria bancrofti. Regarding the treatment, most of the time anti-parasites drugs are given, but like as far as I read, most of the time it is given that precautions are more important to like this disease is like very much like means it cannot just spread like that. So if precautions are taken, then we can also stop its further transmission.
Sir, can I answer Sahil Palander's question?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Sahil, in appendix, a sample is usually only by sample is not collected. Like the endoscopy is only done. Doctors physically do the examination, like if there is a pain or any other symptoms like constipation or diarrhea. So I don't think so. There is any sample collection in appendix is done.
अरे 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 सोनोग्राफी ऐसे क्या कर रहे हो?
हाँ सर.
See, appendix is appendicitis. is an inflammatory condition, right? So diagnosis is not going to need a sample collection process. Sonography by itself will tell you that there is an inflammation. So, and obviously the other than that is palpating. I don't know how many of you know about this term. Palpation is one of the most common ways of diagnosing internal organs condition by the general physicians. Wherein you go to the doctor and you say that मुझे पेट में दर्द है, the first thing that he does is that he applies pressure in different areas of your abdomen using his hands, and he's trying to sense the positions of your organs because they know that how the organ feels externally, what their position is, right? So palpation is the most simple way by which they even detect for any kind of possible swelling and inflammation in the organs, and they find that out, right? But sonography is always there to tell you what is the state of the internal organ. Okay, so you don't have to do a sample collection in that particular case. There are more questions. I hope you guys are going through it.
Yes, sir.
From
Yes, sir. So to answer Anjana's question, like not exactly hurdle, but normal microbial flora would always be there. In further testing, in further procedures, we can use certain media which are like specific to the like organism that we are looking for, and or which may eliminate most of the normal microbial flora. So in this way, we can like not filter the samples, but we can like. What to say, like we can filter take out all the possible normal organisms from normal microbiota, and we can concentrate more on the organism that we are suspecting.
See, I would like to add over here is that number one, Anjana, you know that what you are looking for. Okay, so it's not that you're going to analyze the entire gut microflora there. You are specifically, if you're looking for Salmonella typhi, you're processing the media involved is everything, on those lines. So it's really not going to be a big hurdle there because you're looking for a specific path. Secondly, the gut microbiome studies that are taking place has given us a lot of information of which kind of organisms are normally found and which are not normally found. Now, please understand that when you talk about GI tract, there are some pathogens which are very normally, found in the GI tract, like Helicobacter pylori. It's very shocking that Helicobacter pylori in several urban populations, it is normally found in the gut. Okay, but its number are kept in check by the normal gut microflora. So if its number is going to go beyond a particular point, that obviously happens when your normal flora is affected. Only then this Helicobacter pylori is able to establish an infection. So it's just not about the mere presence of an organism that you come to a conclusion. It's also, diagnosis is never a single aspect based process. You are taking a lot of factors into consideration. You are taking the symptoms, the signs that are seen in the patient. You are also going to consider what is happening in the process of diagnosis, what are the reports saying. All that together takes you towards the conclusion. So I really don't think that the microflora, the gut microflora, is going to be a hurdle in that case, because on the basis of signs and symptoms, you are having a definite way of looking at that particular case, and you're trying to suspect that, okay, these two might be my causative organisms in this case, and I would want to do the processing in that manner, right? So that is what brings a little focus to the kind of test that you are going to perform. I hope that makes sense to you, Anjana. Okay, there is a question from Ivika also, and I think also from Ishan. Arvind, there are a lot of questions, guys. Please start.
Yes, sir. I'm answering Arvind's question. So PVA is a polyvinyl alcohol, and it is known. It is a known antibacterial agent, and so it is used in transportation of stool sample when we are looking for parasites and their ova. So if we use PVA, we can eliminate most of the bacteria present there. So and like we can preserve only parasites that are present in the sample.
So Ishan, we can also that perform like GDH test, like glutamate dehydrogenase test in case of Clostridium difficile.
Ivika, can you just like clearly mention it, because I have not I haven't understood what you meant by like false positive results while diagnosing in case of GI tract infections.
See, like in lower respiratory tract, we have sometimes that we can get a false positive result. So I was asking if there could be any chances of it for diagnosing the specimens in the gastrointestinal tract as well. So if there are, if what are the regions that it could happen?
What does that mean? What exactly are you talking about when you say false positive in lower respiratory tract also? See, false positive results depend on the test that you are performing, right? So case to case, it's going to vary. So I really don't understand what the question actually means over here, Ivika. Because false positive is dependent, false positive or false negative, whatever it is going to be, is on the basis of a specific test, right? Can you elaborate more?
Yeah, yes. So like, I just wanted to know like, can the test go wrong if?
Obviously, why not? See, it depends on what kind of test are you performing. It can surely go wrong. There could be, a lot of false reportings that could happen just because the test worked out how it should be, but it's not because of the causative agent. That is very much possible. But the reasons will obviously vary on the basis of what test you're talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
Sir, can I add more in that
Yeah.
one? Sir, the result the test can go wrong, like if the sterility is not maintained, if anything other cause anything which is not related to gastric is gastric intestinal tract is sampled, or anything which is not ethical can be take place.
Whoever, I think Karan is casting the screen. Can you show me the section which Aksa spoke about? So, did Aksa speak about transport or the infections? Infections, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
Infection.
yes, Aksa, so other than the viral and the bacterial infections that you have mentioned, do you know about any fungal or parasitic infections which can be seen in case of the GI tract? Can you name a few fungal or parasitic infections related to GI tract?
Yes, sir. There are hookworm is an infection which is caused by nectar Americans, and there are another two infections like pinworm and webworm. And amoebiasis is also one of the infection. Chloria is also a bacterial infection which is caused by Vibrio chloriae. Peptic ulcers, like here it is mentioned, it is caused by hemolytic Helicobacter pylori. Hello.
Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Uh, yes, Nitin sir has asked a question.
Sir, I have not read about anything like Campylobacter jejuni, but I have read that it can cause like diarrhea or other illnesses, which the and it is caused by consumption of contaminated raw milk or dairy products. I have not read much about it.
So to continue with that, sir, it is mostly a foodborne illness and which leads to diarrhea and fevers and cramps.
Yes, sir. It is usually caused by eating raw and raw poultry or milk products, and the symptoms are usually seen after maybe 2 or 6 days after the person has consumed something which contains campylobacteria, and if it is not treated correctly, it can lead to several bad cases.
There is one more question in the chat box.
Yes, sir. It is GI tract infection.
Sir, I think it is a GI infection, as it is inflammation of appendix, and it is often seen that appendix are blocked, and thus thus it can form infection and cause the normal abdominal pain and nausea.
Okay, so thank you, group 4. You can submit your PDFs individually, rename your PDFs with your roll number and your name and submit it by today. Also, Karan, please send me the JPEG file of the poster by email.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sir, can I stop the present?
Yes, you can stop sharing.